Okay, so we're prepping for Utkatasana, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to develop the strength in the lower body.
You are a big fan of starting on the back. So if we were to start on the back.
I did this on the back and it was hard.
Yeah, you can start on the back and just start with an open chain exercise of bending and straightening the leg.
Hinge and unhinge the knee.
Because a lot of the mechanics that you're working with here is how do you bend your leg, which is a really big deal in yoga, and how do you straighten it? And yes, those mechanics change when you're weight bearing, but if you lie down, you can look at your leg, which is very helpful. And first of all, can you hold the thighs stationary? Interlace your hands behind your thighs.
And hinge and unhinge the knee.
Yeah. Bend and straighten the leg.
Lift the foot flex.
Lift the foot. And then once you flex, you really start to get into that calf length, which is a big soft tissue impediment to ankle dorsiflexion, your ability to flex at the ankle sufficiently enough to squat, right? So we have to get those calves loosened up, and you can turn your ankle in circles and see if you get a big circle and see if you can hold your knee still so your knee isn't moving all over the place when you try to mobilize the ankle independently.
The other thing that's nice about it is when you're working the hip hinge, right? If you keep your pelvis neutral, because we were talking about that.
Are the legs in the air still, or where
the legs are? The legs are in the air. You're bringing your thighs in towards your chest. You're seeing how close you can get your thighs in towards your chest with your pelvis staying grounded on the floor. And that'll give you a sense of what's available to you for hip hinge with the neutral pelvis.
Well, I would say do this one leg at a time, bring the knee into the chest. And once the knee is past the hip, the low back has to flatten. So just anatomically, but we don't want it to flatten before that point, which tends to happen with tuckers. And we don't want it to be slow to flatten, which happens with people who are in that lumbar extension habit. So getting the timing of that hip movement and the lumbopelvic rhythm is a nice basic way to understand that. But I don't even think that's the big game here. So there's a million ways into every pose. Broad strokes with Utkatasana, I would say you're focusing a lot on lower body mechanics.
Yeah. Really activating all the muscles, right? We really have to activate. It's a very strong and effortful pose in the lower body.
Yeah.
The more we really participate with the effortful part of this pose, the more not only does it stop causing pain, but it starts to reveal the amazing gift it gives us, which is the ability to be powerful in our lower body and how much that allows us to do. And I'm thinking of a client I'm working with who has rheumatoid arthritis, and she's lost the ability to press her foot away and down or into the step or whatever. And that's really limiting. And again, you were saying this before, when we work with these older clients or people who are struggling with stuff, we find out, as they do, there are things that they have lost the ability to do that we did not even know were things that would be possible.
To lose.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this effort is like a word that feels like we want to take that out of yoga and make yoga more relaxing, and we want to address the nervous system. But I feel like your attention is either going towards something unproductive, or I call it the pose is empty. Like when it's mindless, the pose is very empty. It's just like the outlines of the pose, and then alignment fleshes it out and it takes on a 3-dimensionality. And so it's just attention more than maybe effort. Because if you attend to something that's in need of attending to, and you give it your attention and your time and you could even say your love and your focus, it grows, it yields. These things arise, and it's a fertility thing that happens from the earth. It's not just not doing something. It's actually directing the energy into something productive.
Yeah. And, I think intention's good, but I also think effort is good. And when we're talking about the nervous system regulation, what we really want to cultivate is the ability for it to shift to low gear easily, to shift back and forth, right? For most of us, it's in the sympathetic state, and, it takes a while to drop down, and then it bounces right back up, right? So we want that resiliency to move back and forth. And it makes me think of a pediatrician I had with my 4th kid who had a lot of energy, and she would say, have him press against a wall. Just have him try to move a wall. And this has that same thing to it where it's like you are depleting, you are really fatiguing your muscles. And through that effort, you will find release. So it is a pathway to working with a healthy nervous system. And we sometimes forget that. The healthy nervous system is one that can respond and move back and forth. The problem with most of us is it's stuck in overdrive.
So we've been fans of saying when you lie on your back, you can adjust your pelvic tilt by using your feet. And if your feet isometrically pull back towards your sit bones, you're engaging that posterior chain a little bit more, hamstrings, calves, low back muscles, creating that arch. And that gets people a sense of using the back of the leg a little bit. And in this image of scissors, if the knee is the pivot point of the scissors and your thigh and your lower leg are the blades, right? You can be moving those towards each other or spreading them apart. And so you kind of get that open and close idea of the scissors, which then it translates fairly well, I think, into standing poses. And weight bearing is then seeing if I move my sit bones and my heels towards each other, it has an effect. If I move them apart, it has an effect. I can feel that in downward dog. I can feel that in a number of standing poses. And I can feel it certainly in Utkatasana.
Yeah. I was even playing this week with the kind of scissoring that you were talking about, the foot shortening, right? Yeah. Because this is a pose that to me feels so much more productive when I am on my foot in a way where the ball mount and the heel are actively pressing into the earth. And then I'm trying to elevate the arch up. So I'm trying to like shorten that. And that's a really lovely way to make sure you're engaging all the way up through the pelvic core, right? The pelvic floor, inner legs, all that stuff gets fired up. So yeah, you can play with the feet and kind of inspire and engage so much more than that.
Yeah. And I think that's a wonderful way to stop that pronation, which is really common in this pose, is those arches collapse, the knees fall in, the pelvis tilts anteriorly, the lumbar spine arches too much, and then it's all in your knees and in your low back, and you can't breathe.
Right.
Well, let's get the pose to standing.
When I was doing this, I think it is nice to do a prep for this with a supported squat, 1 or 2 blocks, however many blocks you need. So when you're in malasana, you feel your sit bones as the base of the pose. And then I was doing this and I was like, push your sit bones into the block, just push the right and then just push the left because that's easier for me. And then do that with both of them and then press into your feet and then lengthen the torso, right? So you get to do the pose in a deep squat, but you're completely supported, right? It's really helpful because then you get the mind-body awareness of what you're trying to seek without that support.
Mm-hmm. So then if you can do it either seated, you can offload the weight to the wall. And I like doing downward dog in an Utkatasana. I know you're a fan of forward folds with the bent knee.
Oh, yeah.
And so in downward dog, the benefit is you can also now see your ankles and you can see your knees and you can start to bend and straighten the leg. And in a particular way that might be useful here is it's often the cue is sit bones to the ceiling, which is a very valid cue, and heels down. And so we're always sort of opening that posterior chain. But then as we want to carry it over to Utkatasana and contract, shorten, engage that posterior chain, we're moving sit bones and heels towards each other. So you lift the heels. Now we're in that plantar flexion, and then the sit bones come down. It's sort of the scissors closing in that same way, sit bones and heels towards each other. But now go ahead and try to straighten the leg as you're trying to close the scissors. Open the scissors, but try to close them the whole time. And so we get this sense of how do I engage a muscle as I lengthen it instead of just locking out the knee, collapsing into the ankles and having the heels rest on the floor and the sit bones be either too high or tucking. We've created this dynamic dialogue between these two distal points.
Yeah, staying with the scissors, right? And if the knee is the top and the 2 blades are the foot and the sit bones, you can think of extending the legs by pulling the parts away, not using the knee, but like, can I press down to the foot and can I lift the sit bone up? And then you unhinge the knee in a way that is not relying on the joint, but offering the joint. It's so much more generous and really supportive of a healthy joint to not say, okay, knee, you're going to do this. You got to lift up this whole body.
Yeah. And then we're getting into knee tracking. Just try to get people to track the knee over ankle.
The knee over ankle will be helpful for you regardless of what your natural stance is. And pay attention to that because if you have knock knees and you bend your knees are going to come in. That's hard on your ankles, hard on your hip, hard on your knee. So you have to align this for your body.
So yeah, there'll be two strategies when the knees come in. The feet might pronate and the feet are basically straight ahead, or people just rotate at the knee, so then the knees are straight ahead, but then the feet are pointing out, which is called a miserable malalignment syndrome. So just so much knee shearing, so that we're correcting the knee position more from the hip. So thinking of widening the knees and then the foot placement, if you can get them to track together, this would be optimal. So from like the downward dog with the bent knees, the other image I've been using lately to keep the head of the femur centered in the socket. I think I've honed my metaphor so that the head of the femur bone on each side is a Doberman. And these Dobermans are like big, strong dogs. I realize that you can have other movements of the femur bone within the socket, other instability. But especially in the yoga crowd, we're getting a lot of anterior glide in that femur bone.
I'm really looking forward to this analogy. Keep going.
The head of the femur bone on each side is a Doberman. So the Dobermans are always trying to lunge forward. Just think of a strong dog always lunging forward for squirrels. And then you have a harness on these dogs, right?
Is that our hamstrings?
It's your deep lateral rotators. It's those little postural muscles. We
yeah.
talked about those in Warrior 2. So that's the harness. And then when you go from a bent knee downward dog to a straight leg downward dog, you're pulling the Dobermans back using those harnesses, the thut. If you don't want to explain this to people, you just say contract where the thigh meets the butt. Under the gluteal flap, there's an area there. It's a little bit of hamstring, it's a little bit of glute max, but it's also those deep lateral rotators. They go from the sit bone to the greater trochanter.
Yeah.
Right. So we're contracting that. That's the harness. And so then walk your hands back to your feet to come to Uttanasana. I'm a really big fan of that instead of walking your feet forward. And then as you come to standing, right?
Because the harness is still pulling when you do that.
You're getting that posterior movement, right? You can like lift the heels in downward dog, walk your hands back towards your heels, your butt's up in the air. And then the heels can root down and the scissors close and the Dobermans pull down to bring you up to standing. They're assisting the glute max and bringing you up to standing. So we just want those Dobermans in place. And then when you sit into Utkatasana after that, you're initiating that with the thut contraction. You're pulling the Dobermans back with the harness, sit into Utkatasana, hold there, rock your weight to your heels, get the glutes to fire up. Your hamstrings are working and your quads are working, but it'll be 50% quieter in your quads.
Yeah.
And it should come out of the knee.
It's in the belly.
It's in the belly of the thigh.
You know, the other thing that's fun about this pose is you have to use your butt. You want it helping you get your pelvis back into alignment, but we don't want to clench. I never want people to clench, but I hadn't really thought of like, until you were saying upper butt, lower butt, which part of the butt are we using? And so this would be upper butt action that you're asking, I think, to sort of.
Because you're in a lot of hip flexion.
Yeah. And it's so cool because then it's like, oh man, these things can do a lot.
Yeah. To get those upper fibers working and to get those stabilizers working deeper and get the glute medius on the side working.
They don't just clench or not clench.
Right. And maybe hands on the outside of the knees,
pressing
bursting knees
in and
apart.
pressing them out.
Right. And just getting those hip abductors, that opening where the knee would widen isometrically. Then if you go to widen your knees with that action and you get a lot of front of the thigh sensation, see if you can rock your weight to your heels, zip up the belly, give a strong exhale, then lightly start to push the knees apart. Maybe lifting the torso a little more vertically in order to try to drive the work back into the glutes.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And these are generally cues for really flexible students. So if you get someone who's coming to you and they're a weightlifter, right, you're just going to get them to soften and melt into the pose. You know, don't be cueing all this muscular action. Whenever we're really emphasizing muscular work here, it's because we're assuming that you're dealing with largely a super flexible, joint hypermobile kind of population, not people who are cross-training in yoga, like coming to yoga for recovery. You're cueing them to relax, and just traditional cueing works just great for that population. Anyone doing yoga frequently or for many decades, now we start to have to recruit this muscular work back in. It's not about relaxing into the pose.
No. And I think it's just about learning how to use your body to support yourself in all these different postures, in all these different ways, and figuring out a way that each of the poses that we do can offer something that can serve us. And we do it in a way so that it continues to feed and nourish and empower us. I've
realized that to get that posterior chain to work, it can be very helpful to elevate the heels and get the torso more vertical, kind of a trick that weightlifters do. If you're under load, they want that torso more vertical because they're trying to prevent that anterior pelvic tilt. They're trying to compensate for a lack of dorsiflexion in the ankles. All of this helps to bring the torso more vertical, and there's a lot of benefits to that.
Well, and that's one of the best ways if you have knee issues is to elevate your heels. I have one of those calf stretching boards. So if you stand it with the heels higher than the toes, you can do squats. It's really good to do it with like a ball or a block in between your legs. And that way, people who have a lot of knee pain can do more movement in the joint without the discomfort that they have when their feet are flat.
And this is where it gets really tricky because that's where these ankle dynamics are coming in. And so if people lack the dorsiflexion, the cost is paid in the knee. So instead of improving dorsiflexion, the cheat is like, we're going to raise the heel.
We are going to touch briefly on the ankle and actually the low lunge. I'm a big fan of a dynamic low lunge, and typically in a low lunge or any lunge, I don't want your knee past your ankle, but in this we do. And we want to move slowly and with control. And I like to see how far I can go with my foot fully grounding into the earth, right? So I'll press my foot down, try to lift the arch up, and then it's really fun, again, to steer with the foot. So you pull that front heel back, and that's going to bring your knee forward, and it's going to bring your hip forward, and you want the knee to be higher than the hip because then it's creating more of a hinge in both of those joints, right? If I keep my hips high above my knees, then I miss the opportunity to really work the hinge in the hip. And I'll come back and forth. And like you said, you got to track that knee. You got to make sure it's coming straight. Often, take a side street. It's easier to get there that way. So then you back up and you go slower and you see where it is that the knee wants to, step to the side in order to go forward. And that's where your work is.
Yeah, and squaring the pelvis and zipping up and controlling a lot of the distortion. Once you can track the knee, then your body's like, oh, well, I guess I'm going to side bend and twist and rotate the pelvis instead to try to make this happen in the easiest way possible. So you can use that scissor analogy of that heel dragging back, like you said, Jane, and then the back knee moving isometrically forward to close the scissors. Now the scissors is the front leg and the back leg.
Yeah.
And that more traditional way that yoga teachers talk about that. And you can move from the low lunge to straightening the leg into a runner's stretch with hands on blocks. And the more tight someone is, they're opening the scissors. Like just open those scissors and let the pelvis sink and get that pelvis to go down to increase hip flexion, knee flexion, ankle flexion. But then close the scissors, the more flexible you are to take it out of your knee, out of your hip crease, and to get a feeling of three-dimensionality in the pose.
Yeah, I like that.
If you face the wall as you do this, you can put your front foot one hand's breadth away from the wall, and then your knee should be able to touch the wall, and that would be sufficient ankle dorsiflexion.
Yeah.
That's kind of a nice benchmark.
And many of us find that there's a lot of work to be done in the feet and the ankles because I don't know why. We don't use them enough.
I think the ankles tend to get very rigid, and it's much easier to point the foot than it is to flex the foot. And the calves get really tight. As the weight shifts forward in the toes, a lot of that is tightness in the hip.
High heels.
And just hip flexor shortness. The pelvis is gliding anteriorly, shifting forward. So now the weight's on your toes. Your calves are constantly tense and tight. Your quads are weak. So it just gets really tight.
Yeah.
And if it's not soft tissue tightness, the talus bone can be off center. There's some cool things that you can use therapeutically to help ankle dorsiflexion, which we could maybe talk about.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So everything is hinging.
Everything's hinging.
And that is going to determine how deep you get in the pose, frankly. There's certainly been a time in my practice where I wanted to get deeper into the pose, feeling that was somehow successful. And so I would go beyond my abilities in depth. And that's where you get a lot of pain. Malasana is a pose that has always been discouraging because I used to be able to do it with my feet flat, right? But I was kind of rounded in the back. And then that became harder. And then when I fractured my hip, it became even harder. But somewhere along the line, I realized, if I can't get to Malasana without my heels lifting up, then all I'm doing is practicing gripping because I'm at the edge where it feels dangerous. So then I gave myself permission to put a block underneath my hips and practice the pose where I can be in the pose. And then the tissue will relax and open and the joints will feel safe. Like, I don't want to put myself in a pose where I'm gripping not to go further, because then I'm just practicing gripping.
Yeah, and that's where it's really cool to think about, okay, where do I need to change some of these angles? So certainly with that deep of hip flexion, I would say you should round your spine, and because it's such deep hip flexion, but you can also round excessively.
Yeah.
Right. So then you're trying to straighten up, which is most of the cues, like lift your chest. So now we can do twists and binds in malasana. We can put a blanket behind the knees so that knees aren't collapsing. So I think a lot of flexible people, we can just collapse into it and it's nothing. Right. But body proportion is a part of this. So you've got long legs and a short torso. So full malasana with your heels on the floor is really hard for someone with long legs. I've got very short legs. I can sit in malasana all day. Right. So in cultures where they do that, they typically have a long torso and shorter legs. So they squat. So and then in other cultures, obviously there's variations and percentages, but
I was pretty sure it was a moral failing on my part.
It's not. Right. I mean, you're going to be a poster child for some poses and other poses.
Yeah.
Some of it's just body proportion, which is entirely a real thing. And then some of it's like when I saw your foot point, your arch is super, super high.
Yeah.
And that talus bone is the only one that doesn't have any muscles or tendons attaching to it. It just floats. So there's ligaments holding it, but it can get pushed really anteriorly, and getting that talus bone to move posteriorly down a little bit can now allow that ankle dorsiflexion to happen. So again, you're working therapeutically, but even in a yoga class, you could take a yoga strap and work on the tibia moving posteriorly when the tibia and the top of the foot come closer to one another. Sometimes that tibia doesn't move back. So you just put the yoga strap at the front of your ankle, make a loop, put your back foot into the loop too. Then you bend the knee forward and you're pulling the lower part of the tibia back.
Yeah.
So you could have a whole class where you focus on ankle dorsiflexion and plantar flexion.
Right.
And you could break that down and have fun with it. And malasana would be a great kind of, that's where you're heading. Let's roll out your calves. Let's massage the Achilles tendon. Let's point and flex the foot as you massage the Achilles tendon and just get some of the fascial restrictions out.
Right.
And then see if this malasana becomes available. Now can your heels get to the floor? Mm-hmm. It has a lot of nice benefits, I think, if you don't collapse into it.
Right. It is a really good pose for us.
And there's some therapeutic applications that you can do to offload some of this weight in Utkatasana. So it's not so open chain. Mm-hmm. So if you put like your hands to the wall.
Yeah, that's nice.
And lean against the wall a bit, a lot of the weight's taken off of the joints there. And then you can start to work some of these ranges without all of your weight like inevitably sinking down.
Yeah.
Right. Where some of that posterior chain stuff is like it's hoisting you from underneath. It's stopping the backwards, downwards collapse of the pose.
Yeah.
And then lifting the heels would quicken that downward sink. So a lot of the yoga students as they get older are not bending their knees in yoga poses. Yeah. And you need to get to a minimum of 90 degrees to go up the stairs properly without a lot of compensations. And you need 105 degrees of knee flexion. So that means you're sitting lower than 90 degrees in order to do stairs, going down the stairs without pain. So we have to coax our older students who are very reluctant to feel sensation. We have to coax them to find the right muscles to distribute the work so it's not all in the quads. So they're not worried about hurting their knees. Yeah. And get them to be brave about bending this knee more deeply, hinging at the ankle.
And that's another thing I was thinking is, you can do this seated on a chair where you just bring your ankles back behind your knees, and you're going to need that to get up off the floor or to get up off of a chair. I mean, that's how I teach it. I'm like, scoot your feet back, lean forward, get the weight into the ball out of the feet, then press it, you're basically unwinding from Utkatasana to get up from a seat. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And really, that's the skill that's going to serve us. Oh my God, this is the pose. This is the pose we need to get up off the toilet.
It's the most important pose.
It's the most important pose.
And when people sit in a chair and they try to stand up, the older folks, since their chests are so low, their abdominals are so shortened, they're trying to use abdominal strength to stand up. And it's like their cores are not set up to lift 150 pounds plus up out of a chair. You have to recruit the glutes and the quads. You have to push through your feet.
You got to press through the feet.
Yeah. If you harness those Dobermans before you try to stand up from the chair, and if you can get your heels to the floor and drive from the glutes to get up and not overuse the abdominals. So standing up out of the chair, sitting down into the chair as slowly as you can and trying to hover right over the chair. These are great practices therapeutically.
Yeah. All right.
Well, we've got that one-legged squat.
One-legged Utkatasana.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. If you want to take this to the more challenging side.
And I was just at that knee training today post-operatively, and they're like, go to a single leg squat as soon as you can.
Good. Yeah, those are really good.
As soon as you can. And I mean, you can do a staggered stance, so one foot's ahead, but it's so essential for gait, and it's so essential to strengthen the muscles. And it's just getting people past a lot of this mental resistance, fear resistance, again, offload the weight as needed, but just, you can practice getting up out of the chair with one leg.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing, because all you have to do is do what you can do. That's your growth edge. That's your boundary.
Do what you can do correctly and stop before you continue doing it incorrectly.
Yes.
Raise the seat of the chair a lot.
Yeah.
Blankets, as many blankets as you need so that you only have to lift.
A stool.
Right. Sit at the edge of a stool, lift here without the knee knocking in, without your pelvis shifting over to the side, the hip adducting, without the foot pronating, without your back arching, twisting. Oh my goodness. All of it's going to go to hell when you try to do it on one leg.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Yeah. So every yoga class, right? Tree pose, one-legged squat, Utkatasana, our foundation poses, you're hitting those every time.
Okay. So when are we getting to the upper body?
Let's do that.
We're all in the goddamn lower body, which, by the way, there's a good reason, because you have the lower body set and then the upper body rises.
Well, this is why I'm kind of thinking that Ashtanga Utkatasana felt so much better to you, is because of your body proportion. Because for me, I don't like that version and it goes into my knees. But then I have such a long torso, I have to hinge forward and I have to really reach my pelvis back.
Okay.
And that works better for someone with a long torso.
Okay.
So you have your different styles and you just give people permission to play with each and see what feels better for them.
Right. Right. And then one of the things that happens in this pose where people run into a lot of difficulty is they use their neck to lift their arms, right? And so our arms are rising above through the ribs, pulling away from the navel. So that's the thing that's really helpful to remember is, we are not using the neck to get these limbs. We're using the torso to elevate, and the limbs are a final expression of the torso.
I like the analogy of the ice skaters and the base. The male is going to grab the female and he grabs her by the rib cage and he lifts her up into the air.
Yeah.
And so that feeling of that elongation before you go for shoulder flexion and getting those rib cages to lift. And when he's lifting you, he's lengthening the back body a little faster than the front body. So instead of going immediately into a back bend, hinging at T12, you have that sense of the lifting up through the kidney area, filling that out as you're elongating the spine. So you're not popping those ribs forward, which is going to happen in Utkatasana, Warrior 1, High Lunge, Warrior 2.
Yeah, I think that's a good rule of thumb for almost all poses, is to make sure that you are lengthening the underside of the body as well. So even in a forward fold, like, can I lengthen the front body as I move into this, Mm-hmm. And back bends, can I lengthen the back body as I move into these?
Right.
So
you're reversing what you think it is.
Yeah.
Turning it over. I like that gun shape, the Charlie's Angels you called it.
No, that's Kali Mudra. Kali Mudra, which is the Charlie's Angel Mudra, which is badass.
Yeah.
Because Kali's badass. She destroys things so better things can come. So we could use some Kali Mudra right now.
Right. And I think that's a little tough with broad shoulders, but you can certainly achieve it through some relatively harmless elbow hyperextension.
Or they don't have to come together.
You can hold a block between your hands.
Yeah, they don't have to come together. If coming together doesn't serve you, it doesn't serve you.
Right. It can be one wide.
All you do is want to make sure you're not using your goddamn neck to lift your arms.
Right. You can use the strap. You can
Strap's
burst
great.
the strap. You can, Yeah. Interlace the fingers, reverse the palms, and stretch up. And you get that sinking down and that stretching up, pulling from both directions.
Yeah, the taffy thing. Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah.
And this is one of the ones where I'll put the strap behind my ribs and try to hoist my ribs up away from my pelvis because it feels good.
Right. If you are looking up.
Right. If you're looking up, lengthen the back of your neck as you gaze up through your eyebrows. Do not bend your neck back.
Yeah, it's the fastest part of the spine to extend. Like I say, in a twist, you have to get like 3 inches of upward for 1 inch of twist. And I think for looking up and getting into that neck extension, you want like 2 inches of thoracic lift for every centimeter of cervical extension. Yeah. So you're just kind of distributing that a little bit better.
Yeah.
But if you've got your Dobermans well leashed, a lot of this stuff is going to feel pretty secure. If you release those and everything shifts anteriorly and then you go into too much back bend, right, then it all feels sort of unhinged.
Yeah. But that won't be happening if you're doing it with us because you will be actively grounding into your lower body in a way that's similar to tree pose. You're going to be rooting down. The only thing is your legs are not straight. And you are not in the joints, you are in the tissue, you are in the musculature, and it's all showing up to help everything stay rooted and grounded and strong and stable and powerful.
Yeah, and your body's distributed within gravity. So your skeleton is helping to support you. So when we say like the joints aren't supporting you, it's that they're not collapsing.
Yeah, it's not.
You're maintaining the space.
You're not doing it just with the joints.
Right. You're not hanging in your joints, which is how most flexible yoga people do this pose.
Yeah. So, well, you know what's so fascinating about our conversation? Well, they're always really fascinating to me. I spent all this time thinking about it, and I thought I had discovered something new, only to have this conversation with you and realize there's so much more to discover. There's so many ways that this pose can offer, I don't want to say healing because it is healing. It's just embodying the strength and power that we already have, but understanding that we need to be really rooted in the self in order for the uppercase self to, thrive. That's really fun. Oh my gosh, I'm falling in love with this pose. Well, Sarah, this has been a good time.
Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you guys for listening in and continuing to learn what these poses have to offer us in so much more than we imagined.